Entonces, gracias por estar aquí. Les recuerdo que además de esta conferencia, luego a las 10 de la mañana, para quienes puedan extender su estancia y continuar la celebración, tenemos otra conferencia en la sala Gulfstream con el doctor Rafael Fernández de Castro, ¿sí? Están invitados. Bien. Ok. Obviamente, estando en frontera, ¿verdad? Estamos, por un lado, obligados a seguir protocolo, pero por otro, hacer lo que es típico en la frontera y en la dinámica de California con Baja California, y es no mezclar, pero sí cambiar del inglés al español, del español al inglés, ¿sí? Así es de que si me permiten, y para que nuestro conferencista, ¿verdad?, escuche lo que tenemos que decir de él, ¿sí? Haré la introducción o presentación en inglés. Mr. James Kane will remember a little over a year ago we coincided in Boston. Why Boston? Well, there's a major conference that the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education organizes. And we sat in on a session and found very interesting and appealing the theme that is the topic of today's presentation. James Kane is considered the leading researcher and authority on what makes someone truly loyal to another person, to an organization, or to a cause. As a behavioral scientist and consultant who has helped some of the largest and most well-known organizations in the world, including Apple, Amazon, Marriott International, the Mayo Clinic, Major League Baseball, he has built nearly unbreakable relationships with not only their clients and customers, but with members, fans, volunteers, vendors, sponsors, and employees as well. James reveals the science behind the real human emotion called loyalty, which, by the way, that's something that I believe exists at CETYS, Comunidad CETYS, Familia CETYS, but that we don't refer to it as loyalty. And that's why we found it very important and interesting and appealing to bring James Kane here. And what anyone can do to receive the benefits of loyalty. The author of an upcoming book, The Loyalty Switch, James has worked with every major industry while advising and training organizations around the world, ranging from global 1,000 giants to small regional companies and organizations, right, Jim? Such as CETYS Universidad. Just yesterday, we had a workshop in Ensenada where we had the leadership, statewide leadership of CETYS, engaging in a conversation with James Kane and how loyalty can be embedded into and woven throughout the fabric of organizations. As one of the most quoted and profiled authorities on loyalty in the traditional mainstream media, James has been profiled in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, BBC, and numerous other global and industry publications. He has taught at both Harvard and Penn State, and is a frequent guest on CNN, CNBC, and Bloomberg TV, which credits him as being one of the best experts in the business. He has shared keynoting duties at global events with such interesting and distinguished leaders as George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Malcolm Gladwell, Hillary Clinton, Jack Welch, Sheryl Sandberg, Thomas Friedman. Oh, by the way, Jim, I don't know if you know, we had him here also. Seth Godin, Warren Buffett, among other leading business, political, and thought leaders. Without further ado, James Kane. Welcome to CETYS, James.
I need to start with an apology that I don't speak Spanish. I wish I did, and I don't at all, so I do apologize for that. But I do appreciate that introduction. I do appreciate the invitation, and I want to talk to you about loyalty in a much broader sense than you probably ever thought before. Because if you turned on your television this morning or opened your computer, you saw loyalty. You see it played out all over the world. by young people who came together to stand up for something that they are afraid of and that they want to be heard, where they want to be heard. And the story of this loyalty is being attributed to this little girl. But for those of you that have played any role in thinking about climate change or thinking about what's happening to the climate, you know that it didn't happen with just one voice. She's become the face of this, but in reality, a lot of people in this room have been talking about this issue for a long, long time. And so this has built momentum over time and can have built up to become what it is, to produce those results that you saw. Every organization has a similar need, including this university, because your goal to be associated with all of these other universities around the world and be thought of in the same and talked about in the same way is a goal that all you have. And so I'm going to talk to you about actually how that happens, because it's really not just about the facilities you build, it's not just about the faculty you have. Somehow to create a movement with all of your alumni to support you is really wonderful. But it's also business communities, it's also the media, it's also partners, it's anyone else that thinks of this university in a certain way and is spreading that word and willing to come to your university. And that's all about loyalty. So again, it's not this simple act of devotion that you as students, you as faculty, you as administrators and alumni have. This is about, can you create a movement where people believe in this university and believe in what it is and what it can be. And so while I appreciate Dr. Leone introducing me, I do introduce myself. I do it for a very specific reason, and it will be your first lesson in loyalty. So let me tell you something about myself. So who am I? This is me, James Kane, actually James Thomas Kane, actually James Thomas Kane Jr., although no one's really called me that since Sister Marjorie in the 5th grade. My mother called me Jimmy, my father called me Seamus because we were Irish, which meant we came from Ireland, which for those of you that don't know is located here. All 4 of my grandparents came to the United States as undocumented immigrants just before the turn of the 20th century. Despite what people in the United States say today, it was the time most undocumented immigrants came to the United States. The only difference being most came for very noble reasons, such as to build a better life, to avoid political persecution. We got to get this thing working, or to escape religious intolerance. The Irish, we came to the United States because we couldn't get a good potato, which should tell you that if there was a Whole Foods in Ireland, my family would never be there right now. But they did come, they came to Pennsylvania, more specifically to Philadelphia, which some of you may know is the home of our Declaration of Independence, the home to the Liberty Bell, and home to some of our most famous historical figures. They later moved north to Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is the home of coal mining, the home of organized crime, and home to our newest historical figures. It was in Scranton where my father, who as I said was Irish, which meant he had no mechanical skills whatsoever, met my mother, who was also Irish, which meant she had no cooking skills whatsoever. However, they could do the one thing that Irish couples could do exceptionally well. They had 6 kids. Me and my 5 sisters. Exactly. After graduating high school, I got a basketball scholarship to the University of Detroit from this guy. However, he left before I got there. I don't think I was the reason, but who knows. But I realized that after only 1 semester that I liked Greektown and college girls more than I liked basketball. So I ended up leaving and going to South Bend, Indiana, where I went to school here. Afterwards, I lived in Chicago for a little while, and then most of my life in New York City before eventually moving back to the beautiful Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. In 1998, I was asked to go and teach at Harvard based on some of the work that I was doing. And it was there that I met some people with some really big brains who were studying this idea of loyalty. It was actually a lab that was set up at Harvard by a consortium of IBM, AT&T, and GE, who couldn't figure out that no matter what they did for their employees, no matter how much money they gave them, no matter what kind of title they gave them or responsibility they gave them, some would stay, some would leave. An expensive venture for any organization. And they couldn't figure out why this was happening. They looked at it from a management perspective, they looked at it from an operational perspective, they looked at it from a benefits perspective, as to what causes people to stay and what causes them to leave, and it didn't seem like any of those things really mattered. So they decided to look at it from a neurological perspective, and they invited me to join them So I did. I moved to Arlington, Massachusetts. This is where Arlington is, for those of you that don't know. This was the apartment building I lived in. This was the apartment that I lived in. And these were a lot of the companies that we had helped in a very short period of time. Now, for some reason, I ended up getting more press than my partners did. They were fine with that. They were lab rats that used to send me out to talk to the press all the time. Caused a publisher to say, you should really write a book, which allowed me to leave Arlington, Massachusetts, move back to Pennsylvania, where I now just travel around the world speaking to adoring crowds, just like all of you. Hopefully you look that way at the end. I am male, for those of you who haven't noticed. I was born on this date, which makes me over 21, over 25, over 35, but under 65. Closing in fast, however. I am 6'3", I weigh 228 pounds, which I never really gave any thought to until our president released his physical last year, and apparently we are the same size. Now, the White House didn't like this picture very much, and they said it was a fake news, that it was a fake picture, so they sent a corrected version for me with this Sharpie. Anyway, I am a Leo, which doesn't mean anything to me. Maybe it means something to some of you. I'm a member of this organization, this organization, this organization, and this organization. I started this organization to help kids that get bullied in school. I don't eat this, I don't eat this, and I don't eat this, but I will eat this, 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 and this. Mainly because I think they're going to be eaten anyway. Where these three are pretty safe unless I come at them with a knife and a fork. If I could make my entire diet this, I would. Unfortunately, I can't. This is my website. Here's my email address. Here's another email address. Here's my Facebook account. Here's my Twitter account. Here's my LinkedIn account. Here's my phone number. Here's another phone number. Here's my social security number. I am blood type O positive. I bank here. I bank here. I fly in this airline. I've been to all of these places in the last year alone. That put me over 300,000 miles, and now I could add 2 more places onto this list, and Ensenada and Mexicali, so thank you for that. People ask me all the time, when you travel that much, that must be a terrible life, and I tell, and then they say, you know, it sounds an awful lot like this movie. For those of you that aren't familiar with this movie, this is about this very handsome guy that spends hundreds of thousands of miles in an airplane, where he basically gives speeches along the way and happens to live in hotel rooms where he ends up meeting beautiful married women who only want to have casual sex with him. This is my life. With the exception of this, and this is exactly my life. I have been in this, all of these publications and on all of these networks. I've been interviewed by all of these people. What I like the Oakland A's, the Pittsburgh Penguins, CrossFit, Namaste Yoga, Holy Cross Rowing. That's my son, John. Curb Your Enthusiasm, Game of Thrones, Shameless, The Chai, and I apologize. I do kind of like Stewie and the Family Guy. I hate the New York Yankees. There aren't boos here. There's more class. I get more applause for that than anything else I have to say anywhere else in the world. I am reading this book, this book, this book, this book, this book. I wrote that book. I subscribe to these magazines. I like this music. I like these movies. I've been to all of these plays. I only use Apple products. I play those guitars. I wear these clothes. I drive this car, and I got these 3 speeding tickets driving that car. So that is me. So I said that would be your first lesson in loyalty, and there's a reason for that. You see, when Dr. Leon introduced me, if I were to hook all of you up to a functioning MRI, hook your brains up to a functioning MRI or an EEG, I could tell you it would be completely flatline. There would be no response whatsoever, and it's no offense to him. He did a fantastic job. It's just you don't care who I am. And so you certainly don't care about the biography he read about me. You probably have heard you've heard better biographies from Thomas Friedman and any other guests you've had here. You could care less about me. However, if I were to hook you up to that same functioning MRI, when I introduce myself, your brain would look like this. I know this because I've hooked up plenty of brains to functioning MRIs, to people all over the world, different ages, different industries, different cultures. It doesn't really matter. I know exactly what parts of our brain light up when I do something very similar to what I just did with all of you. In fact, in addition to all these parts of your brain becoming active, all of these chemicals like vasopressin and oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine were jumping around like crazy inside of your head, because I am certain that even though I come from a different part of the world, I'm a different age than most of you, I have a different, all kinds of things, bluer eyes than some of you. No matter what, I'm certain that I found something familiar to you or that we may have in common. And the minute that I did, your brain loved it. Your brain loved finding that connection with someone else. And that is exactly how our brain works. We think we have these billions of neurons inside of our head that we can't possibly make sense of, that it is so complicated. And I'm here to tell you that our brain is a relatively simple object, especially when it comes to building relationships or deciding what to do. It looks for patterns all the time. It is not very analytical. It simply looks for patterns that will tell it what it should do, what it shouldn't, who it should like, who it shouldn't, who it should be loyal to, and who it shouldn't. And it looks for it in every kind of way. But see, the interesting thing is that every one of you have relationships in your life, and they happen all the time. You make new relationships all the time. And in your brain, your brain will place that relationship somewhere on a spectrum. So it has to decide what kind of relationship it actually has with someone else. And so on the far end of this spectrum are when relationships are hostile. These are the people who hate you. I hope you don't have any of these, but you know they exist, right? All you have to do is go to TripAdvisor, you know they exist. Because why in the world, if someone has a bad experience in a hotel or on an airline or in a restaurant, do they feel the need to sit down writing paragraph after paragraph, warning all of us how we should never do business with that organization, when they would never do that for a positive review? Well, part of it is a psychological defense mechanism. You see, we're all social animals. We live in social groups, which means if I can't get along well with others, I'm potentially kicked out of the group, and I can't have that. So see, if something goes wrong in our relationship, it's not enough for me to tell him it's his fault. I need to tell all of you that it's his fault. Because if someone's going to get blamed and someone's going to get voted off the island here, it's going to be him and not me. The best way for me to protect my reputation is to ruin someone else's. That's why people at this end of the spectrum are so loud and so vocal. You wish they would go away. They have no intention of going away. Because if they do, they're admitting that they're at fault, that they can't work well with others. So they have to blame it on someone else. It's not my fault, it's yours. Like I said, I hope you don't have any of those relationships. But on the other end of the spectrum is the ones that we're going to end up talking about. And so you see, there's a full spectrum here about the kind of things that we have, the kind of things that we do. And here's what our brain does. This is why our brain is really pretty simple. All our brain decides all the time when it comes to relationships is, are you a potential threat to me or are you an opportunity? Whoops. That's all it does. It simply decides, are you a potential threat or are you an opportunity? The closer we are to being an opportunity, a good thing, it moves up to love and loyalty. Bad thing, it goes to hate and hostile. It is not all that complicated. That's how our brain works. And it constantly moves relationships, every relationship you have, up and down the spectrum. The closest friends are on this side, the worst enemies are on the other. And it just moves it constantly. And so when you're building relationships, any relationship in your life, you have to know that that's what's happening. The only thing that I'm going to share with you today is how that happens. Why does it move up and down the spectrum? Because in your best interest, in your personal life, in your professional life, and even the life of this university, you depend upon people in order to be successful in your life, to build strong relationships with them, to get them to all think that you are an opportunity for them to support you, to recommend you, to advocate for you, to retain you, to do all kinds of good things. That's what loyalty gives you. But see, in this, if you think about this, it would be better for our brain to simply be neutral, to not have an opinion one way or the other about someone, right? It would be a safer place to just be in the center, to have everything be transactional. But transactional is what most of the relationships we actually do have. If you think about the relationships you have where it is completely neutral, we think that we should get a lot of credit for the things we do in our life. For all the faculty in this room, you think that your students back here should love you because of how good of a teacher you are. because of how much you taught them. Guess what? Their family is paying you to teach them, to do a good job. It is a transaction. In fact, the only time they're even aware of you is when you don't teach them very well, when you don't do your job. But for the most part, it's an expectation. It's simply a transaction. You did what they were supposed to do, or what you were supposed to do. That's an even swap. No different than going to a gas station. You go to a gas station, you give them your credit card, the hose fits in your car, it fills your tank up, you drive away. You feel no obligation to go back there, no obligation to tell others about that, no obligation to do anything. They did exactly what you thought. But this is really hard for us because every day we go to work, or every day you interact with people, and you think that somehow they should be giving you credit for doing the things that they're expecting you to do, that you're being paid to do, that you were hired to do. That's the part that's really hard. We hope that someone is acknowledging us, and for the most part, they're just thinking, that's what I thought you would do. I'm not giving you any credit for that. So whether you're dealing with alumni, whether you're dealing with students, whether you're dealing with faculty or administrators, or anyone outside this university, if you think that the fact that you're doing exactly what they expected, don't expect a whole lot of credit for it. Relationships heading in that direction are certainly the ones you want to avoid, and you could imagine that they're bad, but these are actually just as bad in some respects, the preferred relationships, and I'll tell you why. Preferred relationships we tend to believe that they are loyal to us. In fact, they fool us into that. These are the people who are the closest in your life that you think love you, and they don't love you, they like you. They're not anxiously looking for another university to work with or work for. They're not anxious for anything else in your life. We are happy with the way things are as long as the game doesn't change. As long as your tuition doesn't go up, I'm good with it. As long as the professor that I had last year, is still here, I'm good with that. As long as the schedule that I have is good, I'm okay with that too. As long as nothing changes, I'm fine with the way things are. But you're going to change. You keep changing. You constantly change. I could tell looking at this campus that you constantly change. And the question is, are all those people in the back of the room, when they become alumni and graduate here, will they still stay with you after you change? Because they have a relationship with this university now. And maybe they love it. But when you change, maybe they don't love the changes. That's the danger in our relationships. When we believe that some people are so loyal to us, they will never leave us, and then they surprise us because they do. They surprise us because they weren't really loyal. They just kind of preferred us as long as certain things were in place. And the minute they change, then we go away. So the only safe place we found is at the very end here. And this word, unfortunately, has been hijacked by everyone from hoteliers to airlines to restaurants to mean something very different. They associate it with a marketing scheme, a loyalty program, or something like that. That is not what I talk about. Those kind of things do not produce those crowds that you saw at the first slide there. I'm talking about how you create revolutions and how you create movements. This covers everything from people who are in those kind of groups to people like this in a university, all the way to cults and gangs. And you want to understand why people do what they do, why they form large relationships, large groups like this. It is because of this. So as I said, this is about how our brain interacts with people. And for the most part, you see, I don't care what your religious beliefs are. I don't care what your spiritual beliefs are. I don't care how you think we arrived on this planet or what you think happened before 100,000 years ago. All I can tell you is that 100,000 years ago, every human being that looks like us lived in that little northeast corner of Africa in the Savannah Plains. And for some reason, either it got too hot, it got too cold, we overpopulated it, we ran out of food, or some divine being opened up the heavens and said, you have all got to go. You could believe whatever you want to believe. But for the next 100,000 years, we spent our time spreading out across this planet. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard before. This is a basic 8th grade civics class or social studies class. The only thing I want you to think about is, how did we accomplish this? You see, human beings are basically the 90-pound weakling of the planet. We don't have claws, we don't have fangs, We can't fly, we can't breathe underwater, our skin is fairly easy to penetrate, we have no defense mechanisms whatsoever. And yet we dominate this planet to the point where we can eliminate every other species off of it if we choose to. How in the world did we get so powerful? I could tell you, it's not because we have opposable thumbs. And it's not because we have a bigger brain. Whales have bigger brains than humans do, 10 times bigger. Neanderthals had bigger skulls, bigger cavities, so we presume they had bigger brains. No point having a big skull if your brain's going to slosh around inside of there. So it wasn't our brain that did it. Crows have brains about the size of humans relative to body weight. So it wasn't our brain that did it, at least not initially. What made human beings different than every other species that have ever been on this planet are two things. The first is we learned to live in really large social groups, really big social groups. In fact, there's only 3 other species that even come close to us: bees, ants, and termites. And we're bigger than them, so we won. At least so far. But there's something very different about them than us. You see, they're all brother and sister, or half-brother and half-sister. They all come from the same queen, one queen, in their own hive or their own colony. They work with one another and they cooperate with one another because they are kin to one another. Human beings have learned to do this with complete strangers. In fact, all of you are an example of this 100,000-year-old experiment we've been on, because none of you had to be here today. All of you could have figured out how to, and for the students in the back, you could figure out how to build a life inside your house and figure out some job and sell things to your family and friends. All of you as teachers, you could have figured out how to do homeschooling to your family and friends. You could have done that. You chose not to. What you chose to do is team up with a bunch of strangers, people you don't even know, and teach another bunch of strangers and provide them with your education. And even that wasn't enough, because you said, we're going to do that here in Mexicali, and then you said, well, maybe we should do that somewhere else. So you went and taught at 2 other places, a bunch of strangers teaching strangers. This doesn't make any sense. There's not another species on the planet that would even think of doing this. It's too risky. I don't know whether you harm me or not. I don't know what you can take from me. But humans learned to do this, and it made all the difference in the world for us. But I want you to think about the implications of that. Because if humans took this as a strategy, that living together and working together was going to benefit us, then something important had to happen in that process. See, if I'm going to live among strangers, how did I know who I can trust? Because these were not my family. These were not my kin. I needed to know, and I needed a brain that can identify who I can trust and who I couldn't. And whether you knew it or not, our brain does this calculation at a subconscious level, even deeper than that, an innate level. It needs to understand. It needs to be alerted when it's in danger or not with another person. Because I can't survive in this strategy of social living if I don't have that skill. I'm vulnerable all the time to being taken advantage of, or I can miss out on opportunities. I took this, sorry about that. I took this picture of this little baby deer, this fawn that was born in my side yard a couple of years ago. This was the same fawn, same deer, 2 days later, up walking around, feeding itself, doing what little baby deer do, what most animals do, what most mammals do for that matter, all except these. How long before a baby can walk? About a year. How long before it can communicate or talk? About 2 years. How long before it can take care of itself? 35 is a good start. You see, the second thing, I said there were 2 things that made a difference for humans. The second thing that made human beings different than every other creature, every other species that have ever been on this earth, is from the moment we arrive, we are completely dependent on another human being. Not just for a day, or a week, or a month, or even a year. For decades of our life. At the beginning and at the end, we need another human being, or we die. That little baby deer was walking around in 2 days. taking care of itself. I could not take a 10-year-old, any 10-year-old, and drop them off in the streets of Mexicali or anywhere else in the world and expect them to live. That is nothing against Mexicali. You see, humans are born 2 years prematurely. It is why what's happening at the border, that I apologize so much for, is a tragedy beyond belief. To separate children from their parents is the most important thing that happens to us. That bond that happens. The bond that we create with others is essential to our life. And it doesn't just last a little time, it lasts a long time. So that's why I said if these things are happening and our ability to interact with others and connect with others is important, then our brain had to evolve to do just that, and that's what it does. That is the skill that we have. That is how our brain functions. It looks at how do I leverage a relationship to help me out, to be in my best interest, to make my life better, to make my life safer. You see, while animals have things called instincts, humans have something called emotions. And we romanticize these things. You think about the way poets write about them or the way Hollywood makes movies around them. That is not what our emotions are. Our emotions are a real thing inside of us that control our behavior, that tell us what we should do or what we shouldn't do. They warn us. They are that signal that we have for, are you an opportunity or a threat? Because if I hooked all of you up right now to a heart monitor and a blood pressure monitor, I could elevate every one of your vital signs by doing one thing right now: turning the lights off. Now, why would that happen? Why would your body react that way by simply being in the dark? Why would it activate an emotion called fear in you? It's because as far as your mind is concerned, you're still the 90-pound weakling living in the Savannah Plains. And when it got dark, it was a dangerous place. Never evolved out of us, still with us today. No different than if I brought in some sour milk and you smelled it and you felt nauseated because of it. It's your body's way of saying, don't drink that, you're probably going to get sick. You see, we don't even think about the things that our body does for us that controls our behavior, that are innate to us. We think that everything about our brain is logical, that we're always constantly thinking and imagining and we have control over it. And our brain is controlling a lot of things that we don't have any say in whatsoever. Most of us think that this is based purely on psychology. And you'll hire consultants, you'll have people come in and they'll talk about psychology. Probably all of you have taken this Psych 101 class. And I'm certainly not diminishing that, but I'm just telling you that psychology is very different than these kind of innate motivations of our brain or actions of our brain. Because I've got to go this way. You see, psychology simply looks at the outside world and it uses all of our senses to interpret it. That's what it does. Our brain is nothing more than a mechanism to observe the outside world through all the senses we have and try to compare it to the memories that we have. See, everyone in this room had the same number of neurons that I have, that each other have. If I looked at all of your brains, they would look all the same. The structure is the same. The number of neurons are the same. Maybe the connections are a little bit different. For the most part, they're the same as well. But here's what's different, and here's why psychology is really hard. See, there's things that impact those memories. There's culture, there's your own experiences. There's lots of things that happen to you individually because of your age, because of your gender, because of your sexuality, because of lots of things that make your brain or the way you see the world different than me. So this piece of machinery that we have in our head that all does the same thing, all of it, for all of us, operates a little bit differently in the way it sees the outside world and interprets it. But here's the problem we had when we looked at this, because we originally thought, well, this is psychology, right? It had to be psychology. But how do I get a mob? How do I create those giant crowds? How do you create a movement? How do you get people to join a cult? How do you get people to do that and act as a collective when all of us have individual brains that are acting independently and seeing the world independently? It's because it doesn't work that way. At least loyalty doesn't. Connections don't. I can interact with someone and get to know one person as an individual, and I can know what they believe in and what they care about, and I could change my behavior to impact them that way. How do I change all of you at once? How do I cause all of you to act in unison to do one thing that I would like you to do? when all of you are thinking about things differently. So we realized it had to be deeper. It had to be something that was more innate than that. And what we discovered was that something we all know is that there's an inside world we have too that our brain controls. It controls all of these things. It controls your heartbeat and your breathing. You're not sitting there thinking about doing any of those things. And yet, somehow, you still are staying alive and it's keeping you alive and you're functioning because your brain is operating without you giving it one thought. The connections we have with others, believe it or not, fall into this category as well. Why and how we decide to form a connection with others is nothing more than making a choice for us in controlling the way we behave. Because what we discovered, and I've been doing this in the simplistic way, our brain simply wants these three questions answered. Do you make my life safer? Do you make my life easier? And do you make my life better? And I realized that putting it in the form of a question like that takes it away from this kind of innate behavior. But this is about survival. It's about biology. Every creature on this planet does nothing other than try to survive all the time. Make my life safer is keeping me protected. If I'm forming a relationship with someone else, I need that. Easier is about physics. It's about optimization. It's the second rule of thermodynamics for any of you that know physics. Everything tries to optimize, to find a simpler solution, to use less energy than it takes in. That's the goal. We do that with relationships as well. And to make my life better at the very end of this, I will tell you, is the most surprising of all. Because see, making my life safer, as I said, is about survival. But how do you know? But it's not just about safer from physical harm. We all worry about that, right? We all worry that we can be physically harmed, and so we worry about the people that we interact with, and will you keep me safe? Will you protect me? Especially if I don't have any defense mechanisms. See, as humans, like I said, we were the 90-pound weakling. We don't have that. We form relationships with others so we can get protection, so someone could keep us safe. But it's not just safe from physical harm. It is safe from all the other things in your life, from financial harm. Do any of the students that come to the school believe that they're at financial risk to do that? Are they going to get a fair bargain? Is the investment that they make and their family makes into this school going to produce something where they're better off at the end? That's a risk they're taking. That's the chance they take. If alumni that are out there talking and bragging about your school, are they taking a risk? Is the reputation that all of you are building and all of you in the back are building as students, are you causing your alumni to be proud of this school or embarrassed by the school? Because now it's the reputation at stake. That's what the reputation of all of you will have to live with too. So what we do is we form relationships with anyone that will protect us and keep us safe for that basic need of just surviving. It just evolved from that. But our brain has a mechanism to do this. See, we don't wear a sign that says, you are safe with me. So how do we know? How do I know that I'm safe with someone? Our brain has a mechanism, it developed a mechanism called trust. Can I trust you? And all of you think you know what trust is. I don't think you do know what trust is. Because most people think trust is one thing. They think it's like this chair up here. They say, yep, if I define trust, we'd all agree on it. None of us would agree on what trust is. Because trust isn't about one thing. It's about a lot of things. It's about your character. Can I trust? I hope that doesn't go out there. It's about your character. Can I trust you to be honest and fair with me? Can I trust you to be transparent? Can I trust you to be ethical with me? But it's also about your competency. Do you actually know what you're doing? Again, I'll use the students in the back in evaluating the faculty. Do you actually know what you're doing? Do I feel like you know what you're doing? Like you have your skills and experience and all the things I need? It's also about your consistency. Is the way you behave one day going to be different tomorrow and next week and next month and next year? Because if you keep changing, I don't know what you're going to be tomorrow. I don't know how you're going to behave tomorrow. I don't know whether you'll produce the same amount of work, whether you'll be as helpful tomorrow. If you want me to trust you, you want me to simply know that you will be consistent. And finally, it's about your capacity. Do you have enough resources, enough ability, whatever, to grow? That's what I look for in terms of trust. So all of a sudden it becomes kind of complicated. A lot more complicated than we think. I gotta get this working. You see, trust would be simple if this were all that mattered. Because all of you set a standard for those things I just described. You decide how honest you're going to be. You decide how ethical you will be. You decide how much character you will have. Not only as individuals, but as an institution. You decide as a board, you decide as administration, what's fair? What's fair in terms of our tuition? How transparent are we with what we do, how we communicate to the public at large? You decide how competent you are. You decide by the standards you set, again, as an organization. What kind of teacher are we going to hire? How much experience do they have? What skills do they have? You've decided that. No one is telling you what you should do. No one is telling you, you don't have a handbook that you're following. You're deciding this all the time. And trust would be easy if that's all that mattered, were the things that we decide. The problem is, there is one of those. In fact, there's lots of those. There's someone else that may have a completely different standard than you. What you believe to be fair and honest may not be what someone else believes to be fair and honest. What you believe to be competent and skilled may not be what someone else believes to be competent and skilled. If I believe a good teacher needs 30 years experience and has all kinds of degrees, and that's not you, we have a trust problem. It doesn't mean I don't like you. And that's the problem. Don't take it personally. If someone says, I don't trust you, you would all take it personally. Do not take it personal. Trust is like these chairs you're sitting in. You could say, I like this chair. I like the fabric of the chair, the color of the chair. I like everything about the chair. If it can't support my weight, I'm not sitting in it. That's how we view relationships. It's, do you match what I believe and what I care about? Making my life easier is different. I told you, easier is about optimization. It's about productivity. It's about making my life simpler. You see, I could show you this image and you say, isn't that romantic? That nice couple walking hand in hand, carrying that bag together. Look, any of you that have been in a relationship for any more than 2 years know that romance is not the driver after a while. It's utility. Sorry to be so cynical about that. We know that we can get along better with someone else than typically we can on our own, at least most of the time. They make our life easier. We are motivated to have relationships, to have friends, to have boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, whatever they may be, husbands, wives, because they make our life easier. Now, here's the part that's going to be a little bit surprising to you. It has nothing to do with romance. Zero. As far as our brain is concerned, it is simply looking for the easiest way to make my life, to make this body that it's operating easier. You see, while we would love for people to send us flowers and tell us they love us all the time, after a while you just want them to pick up their clothes and take out the garbage. Just make my life easier. That's what we look for in people. We look for relationships, and our brain formed these social relationships. Our origins of forming social relationships were based on that. The 90-pound weakling couldn't do it on her own. So we formed relationships with others to make our life easier. No romance, purely practical. The problem is this choice we have. We have so many choices. If I asked any of you, I'll just ask the teachers, sorry to pick on you. If I asked you, which of you are the below average teachers in the room? You know, statistically it doesn't work that way, right? Statistically, half of you are below average in this room. But I get to decide what the average is. Dr. Leon decides what the average is, or someone does, your dean does. What if I say that experience matters more than anything else? Then half of you, or whatever age, or whatever experience it is, half of you will be above, half of you will be below that line. What if I say it's something else? The problem is that we never want to be on the bottom side of that. We never want to be below the line. But we don't know who's setting the average, including your future prospective students looking at this school. They have 80 choices. When in Ensenada, they said there were 80 colleges in the region. That's a lot of choices for all the people in the back of the room. How do they know who to choose? And what can you possibly offer them? We have classrooms and laboratories, state-of-the-art experienced teachers, all that stuff. Guess what they're saying too? They say all the same things. There's not enough, you don't have enough moving parts to differentiate yourself. You are not Apple. At least not yet. Maybe that's coming. But that's the thing, is that what you're offering is really about the relationships you're building and causing people to feel like this is in my best interest. You're not only going to make my life safer, but you're going to make it easier as well. Go to the local grocery store, you see the problem with this. The paradox of choice is we don't know what to choose. We are paralyzed by it. We think we know what to choose. We think we like choice. We hate choice. Go to the mustard aisle, you see it firsthand. Because why in the world would there be this amount of mustard in this world? There shouldn't be, but there is. And so what happens is when you walk down that aisle, you stand there paralyzed, not knowing what to do, and then you do the same thing you've always done. You grab the same mustard you've always grabbed. Do you know why? Because you made your mustard decision a long time ago. You don't need to rethink this thing ever again. Until one day you're walking down that aisle, and you notice the price is higher than it used to be. Or maybe you're walking down that aisle, and you remember this bad experience you had, this bad batch. It made you sick when you put that mustard on whatever. And it made you sick where you'll never forget it. Or maybe, just maybe, you're feeling a little hot and spicy that day. And you pick something else. And just like that, you're gone. You see, all along you were picking the same mustard. The same mustard your grandparents picked, the same mustard your parents picked, the same mustard your friends picked, the same mustard every celebrity on television picked. You were picking the same mustard without giving it any thought until one day you walked down that aisle and you noticed the price was higher than it used to be. You remembered a bad experience, or the world told you to try something different. And just like that, you're gone. Now you tell me how this is any different than the world you live in. The danger every time you have to raise your fees to add another program or to expand the school and make it comparable to the schools that you're competing against. Or you have a bad experience here, or a student has a bad experience, or an alumni has a bad experience with something that happens, a bad teacher, a bad class, a bad whatever. Or maybe they think Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jack Dorsey, they didn't need college. I don't need it either. I can learn anything I want on YouTube. I can learn all the history I want subscribing to podcasts. There's lots of ways I can learn. If all we're going to talk about is education, I don't need any of you, and I certainly don't need to pay thousands of dollars for it. So why come? What more are they getting from it? Other than the community and the networking possibilities and all the other things that all have to do with relationships. All have to do with their ability to connect with others so that they find that the connections and taking that knowledge you gave them, that transactional knowledge you gave them that they paid for, can be translated into success or happiness, or both. That's really what that was about. So, making my life easier, I told you, making my life safer was about this mechanism called trust. Easier is something different. Easier is about belonging. And I realized this doesn't make any sense at all, right? Because belonging is about we all hold hands, we sing Kumbaya, we hug each other, right? And why in the world would that be a function of our brain to identify who is making our life easier, this kind of practical thing? The reason is simple, and you will understand this. It doesn't matter whether it's your sibling, it doesn't matter whether it's your closest friend, it doesn't matter whether it's a partner or spouse. You understand the closer relationship you have with someone, the more they know and understand you, the easier they make your life. Because they can anticipate what you will need tomorrow. They can anticipate when you're hurting, when things aren't going well. They can anticipate what you need. They can anticipate all of these kind of things because that's what a sense of belonging does. For a practical reason, that is really beneficial to me because you will make my life easier the better you know me. Anyone who's had any assistant in their life that has been with them a long time will know that when that person goes on vacation or takes a holiday or takes a day off and they send a replacement, you are lost. Or you don't want that help because you know they will not be helpful to you because they don't know who you are. If we want someone to be loyal to us, we need to make their life easier. To make their life easier, we have to know who they are, what they worry about, what keeps them up late at night, what they need, all those kind of things, and then be proactive in solving those problems. A couple things you need to know. One is awareness. Do I actually know who people are? People share more things than ever today. Are you paying any attention? Even the people you work with. You see, we create three-dimensional Facebook pages forever. They're called cubicles or offices. We surround ourselves with the things we care about. We try and tell people, this is who I am. We wear it on our shirts. We wear it on, put it on our walls. We put it on a Facebook wall. We're telling the entire world, this is who I am. Sometimes it's so I don't have to brag. If you walk into someone's office and you see pictures of their family on their desk, some people have pictures facing inward towards them, so they can get the comfort of their family staring them in the face all day long. Other people point it out towards you. They're saying, have you seen my perfect trophy family? Don't you wish you had one just like it? Why would I look at the back of a frame all day if I didn't want you to see it? I want you to see my family. I want you to see every diploma I've ever won since kindergarten on the wall. I want you to see every fish I've caught and every trophy I've won, because I want you to know who I am without having to brag about it. Please don't go changing your offices around. These are really good things. This is a way for people to know you, to know what you care about and what you need. And when you do that, then all of a sudden I can find a connection with you. Inclusion, in addition to awareness, matters. I'm going to take you back. I'm almost done here. Inclusion, I'm going to take you back to the Savannah Plains. I want you to think about something. I told you we got our start as the 90-pound weakling forming relationships with others because they could protect us. We had each other. And we learned something really smart in that process. Because we were doing it and no other creature was, we learned that if we share our ideas with them and they share their ideas with us, me, we were smarter. That was our story. But now I want you to imagine something. Imagine that situation where a small little tribe is doing just that, giving each other protection, sharing information, and they leave me out. They exclude me, and I'm alone in the Savannah Plains. It didn't last very long. I would be eaten by something much bigger. But our ancestors learned a lesson very fast. If you get excluded for any reason, find another tribe. You see, we can't survive on our own. And this is not just about geography. This is about age and gender and sexuality and race and ethnicity. It is about anything. If I get excluded in this world, I need to find another tribe. And what's changed in the world more than anything else today is that the world is so much more connected that I can find a tribe much easier. People who felt excluded because there was nowhere to go in this small little community I had now can find it. And they can find that security. The bad part, so that's a good thing for them personally, the bad thing for society is that we end up being fractured into a whole lot of small parts that are unwilling to give because my little tribe now can give me protection and make my life safer and make my life easier and make my life better. I don't need the big tribe anymore. I don't need to get along well with everyone anymore. I don't need to do any of those things. So it's a two-sided piece to this inclusion. But I'm telling you that every one of us need to feel included. And if you want someone loyal to you, alumni, board member, faculty member, student, you need to make sure they feel included. Otherwise, they will find another tribe. The last one is identity. I'm going to tell you the last thing about our silly brain of ours. I told you it's not very complicated. If every one of you woke up this morning and looked in the mirror and said, every single person that's going to be the key to my success, the key to me being happy, is going to look like me, be the same age as me, be the same gender as me, be the same sexuality as me, be the same ethnicity as me, or the same race as me, the same religion as me, be the same whatever as me, in a way, you're home free. Because this stupid brain of ours, that we think is so complicated, developed those patterns that I talked about earlier. See, our brain takes about 20% of all the calories we take in every day. It takes about 25% of all the oxygen we take in every day. Which means over time, we didn't know when we were going to get our next meal. And so our brain formed these patterns to say, we can simplify this process. We don't have to be analytical. Just look for patterns. Look for the way people behave and take a shortcut. That's simple. That's the easiest way to do it. But when we were this little family living in the Savannah Plains, and we all had to leave. We broke up into smaller little tribes, and this question was, who was on our side? And this stupid brain of ours went to work that's filled with biases, it's filled with patterns, because it said, I could figure this out without having to think very hard at all. If the shape of your eye is different than mine, you're not in my tribe. If the tone of your skin is different than mine, you're not in my tribe. If the language you speak is different than mine, you're not in my tribe. If the God you pray to is different than me, you're not in my tribe. Simple. We're done. And we've been fighting these things ever since. You see, we think that our brain is so analytical about things, and it's not, especially when it comes to identity. However, it is only skin deep. It is only superficial. Because you may think something of someone based on your initial reaction. But the key to relationships is when you get past that, because once we get past that superficial, our brain actually looks for more and something deeper, and it finds those connections. We follow people because we share the same religion as them. We follow people because we share the same sports team as them. We follow people because we share the same political party as them. We follow people because we share the same activism as them. We follow people because we love something as simple as Star Wars and Star Trek, or something as complicated as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We follow people because we believe in what they believe and want what they want. You can get past the superficial if people see who you are. I showed you how I did it. I shared first. I let you see me as more than who Dr. Leone introduced. More than maybe you expected. Something that seemed like you, even though we're from different parts of the world. You see, our brain operates that way. It may react to the initial things, the superficial things, our biography, our appearance. But the more it knows us, the more we find those connections. If you want people loyal to you, you need to share. So, the last one that I'm finishing with is better. It's important for all of you because you have a very noble mission. And I'm not a romantic. I think about a brain in terms of its mechanics. And this one had us stumped. Because why in the world would our brains seek better? But we know we do, because all of you care about things that are more than just eating and whatever, just sustaining your life. You care about going to the movies, you care about reading books, you care about doing all kinds of beautiful things, playing sports, whatever. We care about those things. Why would we care about such a thing? Why would our brain even be activated or care about such things? What would be the motivation behind it? Well, in terms of flourishing, which is what every creature does, it doesn't just survive, it tries to make itself better, or over time evolution does that. But if you can imagine, whoops, sorry, I keep losing this, making my life better, I want you to think about this. And I wanted you to think about us as part of this story. Because see, we couldn't chase down that gazelle or that gnu like a cheetah does. We don't have the physical skills for it. So our brain, our analytical brain, the part of us that can actually anticipate things, said, we can figure this out. Why don't we just send two people over there and chase it down that way, and we'll head it off at the pass? You see, our brain is constantly solving problems. That's what it does. That's what makes us different. Any of you that have a pen in your pocket, you could imagine this. If you took your pen out and you had it in your hand or go to class, you'll know that any animal, anywhere, any kind of animal, all they would do with that pen is they'd come up, they'd either touch it, smell it, whatever. If they couldn't eat it, they walk away. That's the only concern for that pen. Think about what you do with that pen. You have to think about where to hold it, how to hold it, which end to put up, how to make it operate. Then you have to think about how to place it on the paper. And then you have to think about what words to write, and what language to write, and what thoughts to create. It is a pretty incredible thing when you think about that. But all our brain is doing is constantly solving a problem. All the time. We're always solving problems. Imagine as a computer programmer, you just made this if-then logic program where you said, no matter what you encounter, do this if-then logic program. Just solve the problem till you find it. And now imagine our ancestors sitting under a tree looking up at the stars, looking at this image, and asking this one question with that if-then logic program. What are we doing here? Do we matter at all? What happens to us next? All these questions that have no answers to us. And so we have to think about an answer or come up with an answer. And some people search their whole life. Some people find it. Some people find it in spirituality or religion. Some people find it in money. Some people find it in power or respect or whatever it may be. But we're constantly looking for some answer to what in the world are we doing here? And again, not for any romantic reason, simply to try to solve a problem. That's what our brain does. And it never turns off. And so it's frustrating for a lot of people when they can't find that answer. When they can find it with you, if you can offer them that answer, they will never leave. That's why those crowd scenes I showed you earlier, they're offering an answer to a problem that they're trying to solve. It is not individual. After a while, it's about these basic needs. Can you keep me safe? Can you make my life easier? And can you make my life better? And that applies to everyone in this room. And that's why purpose matters. That's why the purpose of your life or the purpose of your organization matters. So that's all you have to do. Make my life safer, make my life easier, and make my life better. And I will be loyal to you. And if you want this, you need to build loyal relationships. Thank you all very much. I'm going to stay out here.
Continuamos con una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. ¿Quién guste participar?
No questions. Left you speechless. Yes.
First of all, thank you for your time and sharing your experience. That was awesome.
Thank you.
And just to be specific, how do you define the word loyal?
That's a great question. I've spent 25 years trying to figure that one out. He asked, how do you define the word loyalty? I will tell you that how about if I give you the answer, the things that it's not, and maybe lead to that? Because I think about loyalty in terms of, we again initially thought of it simply as an emotion, then a behavior. I'm probably closer to it. Loyalty is a strategy. Loyalty is a strategy for living. It is that if I form a loyal relationship with someone else, it's really in my best interest to do that. I can create a lot of things. I can change the world if I build a movement or if I create followers. So the outcome of loyalty tends to be different than what most people think. Most people think loyalty is simply this devotion, this blind devotion. That's not it at all. Loyalty is not hopefully I've explained this well enough. Loyalty is not a selfless emotion. It is a selfish emotion. I am loyal to someone else because it's in my best interest to be loyal. And so I'm going to look for clues to you as to whether I should be or not. I'm going to look for clues from you as an individual, you as an organization, you as a department. I need to get those signals that those three things are satisfied. Here's what we have found in terms of what loyalty produces. It's not just retention. That's one thing. It's advocacy. It's people that once they leave here are saying really good things, and not just people who went to school here. You think that's the natural connection. But the relationship, just imagine one thing. The relationship you have with the press covering you is an important relationship. Why would I get a quote from any of your faculty here when I can get one from any of those? So, but it's because if I understand what that reporter needs, what their deadline is, what the storyline they're trying to run, if I can understand that, then I can make their life safer, easier, and better. That's why they become a reliable source. I will tell you, my entire career, the only reason I'm standing here, the only reason I've been on television, if you want to be on television, if you want to be in the newspaper, if you want to do any of those things, it had nothing to do with what I know. There's lots of people much smarter than I am. I knew how to talk to a reporter. I knew how to give them an answer. It was about them. And then they naturally kept coming to me because anything they got from me turned out to be a good story. So it was really in their interest to have me speak, not in mine. They weren't trying to promote me. They weren't trying to make me into anything. So retention is one part. Advocacy is another. Forgiveness is the third. When you make a mistake, if I'm loyal to you, I will forgive you. If we have a transactional relationship and you make a mistake, I will be hostile. And then the last one is, I just made up this word, but it's called followship. Followship. It means that I want you to take my advice. I want you to be able to say, let's go everyone, and you all come with me. Why would you do that? I need you to be able to not just trust me, but to be able to follow what I say. Again, from the standpoint of cult leaders, gang leaders, people like that, monastic groups, they have leaders that are able to do that, and people follow them. So that's an end result. Loyalty also is neutral. It's for the good and for bad. It is a very powerful force, but I spent 3 weeks living with a cult in Northern California about a month ago, and I could tell you they look exactly like a group of Carmelite nuns that I met in terms of their motivation for being part of that. It's about the inclusion they feel, the connection they feel to the people around them. It's no different. Yeah, thank you, sorry. Anyone else?
Una pregunta más.
Yes.
I just thought at the end of your presentation, when you were introducing yourself, feel free to answer it if it makes you uncomfortable to answer it, but when you're introducing yourself and being the person who you are with all these travels and all these studies that you do, are you in a loving or married in a relationship of any sort?
I am not.
Okay, thank you.
That was the first time I've been asked that.
Hi. Well, since like loyalty is all about personal gain and like sort of kind of like that, what are like the mechanisms or factors that lead to like extremist ideologies where the loyalty is so great that it loses personal gain and some people will even like die for a cause?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will, so I can answer it to you one of two ways. I can tell you in relative to a cult, a true cult, a religious cult, or I could tell you how it works with Trump followers today. Which would you be interested in? How about I do the Trump followers? Because most people care about that. They scratch their head, including Americans, most Americans, wonder how in the world did this guy get elected and how in the world does he have the following that he does? But I'm going to have you apply these three things to it and tell you why those people do what they do and why they're risking their reputation and all the kind of things they have. First of all, and it was not intentional, I can promise you this, it was not intentional on his part at all. He just fell into it. Making my life easier, or so let's start with safe, making my life safer. All they do that every cult leader does, that every kind of extremist leader, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all those people do, is they generate fear. They make sure they build enough fear that a certain group of people start to think that there's something to be afraid of. You have to be afraid of all those Mexican people crossing over the border. They're all coming, and they're all going to take your job, and they're going to change our culture. And all those Muslims are coming from Europe, and they're going to come, and they're going to take away your religion. There's going to be Sharia law everywhere. Constantly stoking fear is one way to keep people from at least thinking, I need a savior. I need someone who will keep me safe. That's what authoritarian figures do, cult leaders, and that's what happened there. In terms of making my life easier, to be able to walk in front of people in the Midwest of the United States and people who had been traditionally working in factories and coal mines and all kinds of industries that went south a long time ago, first to here and now even farther south, to be able to say, here's how I'm going to make your life easier. You will not have to get educated in some new industry anymore. You will not have to do anything. I'm bringing your factories back. I'm opening your coal mines. I'm going to make your life simple. You won't have to do a thing. Sign me up. Count me in. I don't have to do I don't have to go back and get retrained. I don't have to do anything else. So the easier part, you can just accomplish by doing that. in a religious cult, it was give us all your money, call your families, get their money, we'll provide you a house, family, you won't have to worry about any of this stuff anymore. Okay, I don't need a job, I don't need anything, it doesn't matter what my education is, it doesn't matter, nope, you're good. That makes my life easier. Making my life better by running around screaming patriotism, make America great again, and evoking that is this idea of better, some purpose they have. For other groups, it's different. Here's what does happen, though, to go directly to your question about why don't they leave. Any Trump voter who may have been idealistic, thinking, let's just shake things up. Washington's a mess, let's just do something different. Let's take this guy that we've seen on television forever, throw him in there. Some people did it as a joke, some people did it, wealthier people said, you know what, if he's gonna give us our tax cuts, if he's gonna do all this stuff, I'm all for it. I don't care what else he does otherwise. And some people legitimately thought he was wonderful. So, if you still believe that after everything he has said 3 years later, and you can ignore all of the things that have come out, where else do they have to go? If I've attended Trump rallies, if I'm still having a Trump bumper sticker, if I'm still wearing that little red hat, if I'm doing all those things, where do I go? Who's going to accept me? I've isolated myself from the rest of the United States into saying, this is who I am, I'm still for this guy. They have no way out. Cults are the same way. It is very difficult to extract people from a cult because, or to ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any of those places. Where else do I go? How do I go for a job interview? Yeah, I've been with ISIS for the past 3 years. The only thing I have is I have to stay with the group that I'm in. That's where I'm going to get my safety. That's where I'm going to get my protection. So, once you're in, unless you get people out of those things very early, they're in it for the long haul. And that's why even, I mean, we're going to talk about this with you, some of you later. You hate the idea of having the initiator be fear, but sometimes it requires that. So here's what I will tell you. I'm sure that all of you have been attracted to this school because of all the benefits. I think I can get you more attracted to the school if I talk to you about the negatives of not having an education and not getting an education here. Choosing another school. That's a risk, that's going to be a risky thing for you. You guys made a good choice. The people who are not in this room did not make a good choice. You will feel an attachment and a sense of community because of that. And so after a while, you do what you're doing. You wear your name on your shirt, then you'll have it forever. That's what you will be. The same thing happens with cults, with gangs, with monastic groups. Sometimes they follow it because it makes their life safer, easier, or better. In the case of the Carmelite nuns, it was for better. They did for God. After a while, it becomes their reputation. It's who they are, and they have nowhere to go.
Muchas gracias. Ahora solicitamos al doctor Fernando León García pase a este escenario para hacer entrega de un obsequio a nombre de toda la comunidad de CETYS.
That's very nice of you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We hope it's a full size.
I will wear it. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Estimados asistentes, damos por concluida esta solemne ceremonia. Les invitamos a seguir celebrando estos primeros 58 años de logro. CETYS Universidad, pasión que trasciende. Muchas gracias y que tengan un excelente día.